Tenmatsu was an otaku who deeply loved Akihabara's unique culture. One day, he got caught up in a battle against mysterious creatures called the Bud Ones, who attacked humans and turned them into monsters. After being saved by a girl named Madame, Tenmatsu joined her in fighting these Bud Ones in an unusual way, by stripping off their clothes so that sunlight could hit their skin and destroy them. Together with his friends, he made it his mission to protect Akihabara and the otaku lifestyle he cherished so much. The story began when Akihabara was attacked by vampire-like creatures known as the Bud Ones. A man named Tenmatsu and Amatome worked together to fight them. The only way to defeat those creatures was by removing their clothes, since their bodies were highly sensitive to the open air. One day, Tenmatsu was running alone trying to escape from a woman who kept chasing him. Exhausted, he stopped to catch his breath, only to realize that she was already right behind him. Tenmatsu immediately ran again to avoid her. He thought he had managed to lose her, but the woman found him once more. She persistently tried to convince Tenmatsu to buy a piece of artwork worth 950,000 yen, even offering him a 5-year installment plan. She urged him to come back to the gallery and fill out some paperwork. Tenmatsu agreed on one condition, that she would join him in his battle. He then claimed that he was Prince Mabu-ni, sent to Earth by the space goddess Goldeva from the 11th world of Tekken Rizzer, on a mission to collect the Mobamo Silitaro emblems. The woman looked terrified as Tenmatsu continued his bizarre explanation that made no sense at all. She decided to walk away quickly, leaving him behind. Tenmatsu was surprised that the story he wrote back in middle school actually helped him scare off the gallery woman. Not long after, Tenmatsu's younger sister Niwaka ran up to him. She looked confused and asked why he had left her when she had told him to wait. Tenmatsu apologized and explained that he had just been ambushed by a newly revived Mulian. Niwaka had no idea what he was talking about. Tenmatsu went on to say that Yulians were Akihabara's original monsters that could start a war if too many of them appeared. Niwaka then invited Tenmatsu to go to animate with her to buy a new manga that came with a special bonus. Tenmatsu was not interested, but Niwaka begged him to come along so they would not get separated again. She asked him to wait at the nearby figure shop. Suddenly, Niwaka looked up in shock and saw a woman falling from the sky. People screamed in surprise, and some even started taking pictures and recording videos. Tenmatsu had no idea what was going on and was shocked to see that the woman was perfectly fine after the fall. The woman introduced herself as Matome and warned that the area was dangerous. Sure enough, a group of Bud Ones landed nearby and immediately attacked her. Matome reacted quickly, swinging her baseball bat at them. One of the Bud Ones lunged at her, but she struck back and leaped upward, pulling off the creature's clothing, which rendered it unconscious. She soon realized that the enemies she faced were only low-level Bud Ones. Suddenly, Tsurubashi and his bodyguards appeared. They were local residents of Akihabara who came to announce that the show was over and asked the onlookers to disperse. Tenmatsu was confused, wondering if what they had just witnessed was merely a performance. Tsurubashi scolded Matome, but she immediately jumped high into the air and disappeared. Tsurubashi rushed off to chase her. Niwaka, meanwhile, commented that the performance had actually been really good. Later, while Niwaka was enjoying some bread, Tenmatsu looked irritated because he could not find the item he had been searching for at the figure shop. Niwaka asked if what they had seen earlier had any connection to the Bud Ones. The dark rumors surrounding those creatures had been spreading quickly. Niwaka had heard from a classmate's older sister that once someone became a Bud One, they would gain superhuman powers and go on a rampage, attacking others to spread the infection, like a vampire or a zombie. If that rumor were true, it could cause serious trouble, especially since the police were not taking any action and the public thought those incidents were just street performances. Tenmatsu dismissed the story, saying it was nothing more than a silly urban legend. Many people, he explained, had started trying out new things ever since the Akihabara government lifted the ban on street performances. Niwaka then asked Tenmatsu to go with her to Adore's cafe, but he refused. She continued to beg him to come along. A moment later, Tenmatsu received a message from Cage, saying he had found the item Tenmatsu wanted. Without hesitation, Tenmatsu left right away, leaving Niwaka behind. She looked disappointed, reminding herself that he had promised to spend the whole day with her. When Tenmatsu arrived at the store he was looking for, he was completely amazed to find every version of the Anatomy Ranger figures on display. His eyes were immediately drawn to the blue foie gras liver version, a limited edition that had only been available at the Almori event last year. It had been produced again since then because it wasn't popular, so Tenmatsu couldn't believe such a legendary figure was right there in front of him. He felt like fate itself had brought him to that store to claim the mystical collectible. Just as Tenmatsu reached out to grab the figure, a girl reached for it at the exact same time. Neither of them wanted to back down. The girl's name was Arisa. She said she had seen the figure first, so it rightfully belonged to her. Tenmatsu didn't expect her to be that strong. He couldn't even pull the box from her hands. Arisa explained that this rare liver version wasn't just a different color. It had a redesigned body to better reflect the original concept. She wanted to repaint it to match the authentic base color. Tenmatsu was surprised she even noticed that detail. Arisa admitted she loved the liver figures deeply and asked Tenmatsu to let her have it. Tematsu became distracted for a moment, and Arisa took the opportunity to snatch the figure from him. Overjoyed, she began spinning around in excitement. Tematsu asked Arisa to at least share what she truly felt about that rare figure. He wanted to talk about the blue liver together and even hope they could become friends through their shared passion. He realized that both he and Arisa had come to Akihabara searching for rare treasures, breathing in the same air of friendship and sharing the same collector's spirit. Arisa was touched by his words, saying that he had spoken straight to her heart. When Tematsu offered a handshake as a friendly introduction, he was secretly planning to grab the figure again. But before he could make a move, a loud crash echoed through the store. Matome suddenly appeared and mentioned something about the Bud Ones before launching an attack on Arisa. Shocked, Arisa quickly dodged Matome's strike. Matome demanded that Arisa reveal her true identity, but Arisa had no idea what she was talking about. Matome insisted that Arisa must be one of the Bud Ones, judging by her unusual outfit and her superhuman strength. Worried that the fight might damage the figures inside the store, Arisa decided to fight back to protect them. Her punches landed solidly, forcing Matome to respond by pushing Arisa away, sending them both crashing out of the store and onto the street. Arisa tried to escape, but Matome chased her relentlessly. Meanwhile, bystanders began recording the fight on their phones. Not long after, Tematsu overheard people talking about an explosion at the Adores Cafe that had just happened that day. He suddenly remembered that Niwaka had wanted to visit that cafe. Panic set in and he ran straight toward the scene. When he arrived, a crowd had already gathered, and Tsuruba she was helping keep people away from the area. Tematsu tried calling Niwaka, but her phone didn't connect. Without hesitation, he rushed inside and climbed to the upper floor. When he opened the door, he saw several customers sitting motionless. He approached one of them to ask about his little sister, but the customer suddenly screamed, startling Tematsu and knocking him to the ground. The people around him looked almost like vampires ready to attack. Terrified, Tematsu froze until someone suddenly tore through the strange energy surrounding those people and they instantly collapsed. It was Matome. She said she had seen Tematsu around before, though she thought he tended to get in her way. Tematsu explained that he was looking for his sister, and as he looked around, he spotted Niwaka lying unconscious on the floor. He rushed to her side, but one of the Bud Ones lunged forward, trying to strike him with a fork. Matome jumped in to protect him, taking the hit on her shoulder. She told Tematsu to take his sister and get out of there. Tematsu hesitated, worried about Matome's injury, but she told him that he was only slowing her down, and that next time she might not be there to save him. After Tematsu left with Niwaka, another Bud One attacked Matome, and she defended herself using the fork and her staff, forcing the enemy back. Tematsu stopped in an empty room, shaken by everything that had just happened. Suddenly, Arisa dropped down from an air vent and greeted him. She said she had been caught up in a chase and that things had turned around unexpectedly. Her clothes had been torn during the fight, so she had changed into something else. Earlier, Matome had chased her down, but later realized that Arisa wasn't one of the Bud Ones and apologized for the misunderstanding. Out of curiosity, Arisa had decided to follow Matome afterward. Tematsu then realized that Matome often stripped her opponents of their outer layers to neutralize them. Arisa looked at Niwaka and teasingly asked if the cute girl with him was his girlfriend. Before Tematsu could answer, Niwaka woke up and said that her older brother didn't have a girlfriend and didn't have many friends either. Tematsu looked annoyed hearing that. Tematsu asked Arisa to take Niwaka somewhere safe. He trusted Arisa because he believed she shared the same spirit and determination as him. Tematsu was determined to go and fight the Bud Ones, but Arisa doubted his ability, thinking his physical strength was below average. However, Tematsu reignited his own fighting spirit by recalling a line from episode 34 of Anatomy Ranger. Arisa was unexpectedly impressed by his passion and decided to support whatever he planned to do. With renewed determination, Tematsu rushed off to help Matome. At that moment, Matome was on a rooftop, surrounded by numerous Bud Ones. To those creatures, Akihabara belonged solely to them, and all humans were meant to obey their rule. The Bud Ones attacked her from every side. At first, Matome managed to dodge their attacks skillfully, but soon her arms were restrained and their leader struck her repeatedly. Bruised and exhausted, she was accused of being a traitor. For a brief moment, Matome wondered if this would be her end. Suddenly, a cloud of gas burst toward the attackers. It was Tematsu who had come to help her. Thanks to his distraction, Matome was able to break free and rejoin the fight. Tematsu tried to spray them again, but his gas canister was already empty. One of the Bud Ones kicked him hard, sending him flying. Matome was confused about why Tematsu had come, but before she could ask, the Bud One's leader attacked again, knocking her down. The leader aimed a sharp object toward her chest, ready to strike, but at the last second, Tematsu threw himself in front of her to protect her. The attack hit him instead. Matome froze in shock, unable to comprehend why he would risk himself like that. The leader tried to go after them again, but Matome managed to escape while carrying the wounded Tematsu away from the scene. Tematsu lay weak in her arms and tried to speak, reminding her of his own words, that she should always follow what sparks her interest. But before he could finish what sounded like a final message, he went completely still. Madame desperately tried to wake him up. Tears fell as she begged him not to die, not for her, not like this. Refusing to accept his death, she gently held him close and pressed her lips against his, channeling a mysterious energy between them. A brilliant light surrounded their bodies, and moments later, something miraculous happened. Feimatsu opened his eyes again, confused and disoriented. Madame felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She explained that she had performed what she called a transcendence operation, something that went beyond fate itself, though it came with side effects. Before they could process what had just happened, more bug ones appeared. One of them, still holding a metal fork, lunged at them. Feimatsu instinctively caught the weapon midair and managed to defeat the attacker in an unusual way by removing parts of the creature's outfit, exposing it to the open air. Everyone watching, including the remaining bug ones, was stunned. Feimatsu realized something: these creatures were sensitive to direct air exposure. That meant the fastest way to neutralize them was to remove their clothes. Acting quickly, he disarmed several of them using this strange yet effective method. But the Bud One's leader attacked again and managed to strike Feimatsu hard enough to knock him off the rooftop and onto the street below. Madame rushed down to reach him. More Bud Ones surrounded them, but Feimatsu fought back, defeating them one by one using the same unconventional strategy. Finally, when the leader lunged toward him, Feimatsu threw a piece of fabric, caught hold of the leader's clothes, and pulled them away in one swift motion, ending the fight. A crowd began to gather, thinking the whole scene was part of a movie shoot. Some even recorded it with their phones. Feimatsu, still catching his breath, accidentally found himself staring at the defeated leader, who was left partially unclothed. Embarrassed, he quickly looked away when he noticed Matoma had caught him doing so. Surprisingly, Madame wasn't angry. She said she was impressed by how effectively he handled the situation. Matoma then introduced herself properly, but Feimatsu chuckled, saying her name reminded him of a mayonnaise brand reviewer. Madame apologized, saying that ever since that moment, Feimatsu would no longer be able to live a normal life. He had seen the hidden side of Akihabara, a side filled with mysteries, and now he was destined to keep fighting alongside her. However, while Madame was speaking seriously, Feimatsu seemed distracted, barely listening to her words. He casually suggested that they go to a clothing store nearby so they could get changed. Madame tried to explain something else, but Feimatsu already understood this was only the beginning of their new battle together. That night, Madame told Feimatsu that the creatures they had been fighting were called the Bud Ones, bloodthirsty monsters that disturbed the peace of Akihabara. Feimatsu couldn't believe the rumors were actually true. Most Bud Ones were low-class types, their bodies possessed by demonic entities known as kurobugs. There were also Hazoku, beings capable of creating higher-class Bud Ones. Madame grew annoyed at Feimatsu's indifference, only to realize he was simply hungry and wanted to buy a katsu sandwich. She explained that the Hazoku were non-human beings able to create Bud Ones, and that she herself was one of them. Some Hazoku lived peacefully alongside humans, just like Matoma, who fought to protect the city of Akihabara. Lately, the Bud Ones had become more active, and Matoma had to keep fighting since her clan had defended the city for over 300 years. Because Feimatsu now possessed special powers, he could no longer leave Akihabara. Madame told him to join her in the fight against the Bud Ones. Feimatsu, however, wasn't interested. He said it all sounded like too much trouble and wondered why they couldn't just ask the police or the citizens for help. As he tried to leave to buy his katsu sandwich, he suddenly hit an invisible wall near the city border. Madame explained that the entire city was surrounded by a strong energy barrier designed to keep the Bud Ones trapped inside. When Feimatsu accepted the fate transcendence from Madame, it meant he had become her subordinate, a high-level Bud One. His hair would glow whenever he released his power. A short while later, Niwaka and Arisa found him, and Niwaka was overjoyed to see that Feimatsu was safe. Madame brought them to her base, an old hobby shop warehouse. Feimatsu couldn't contain his excitement when he saw all the video games inside, while Arisa understood why he was acting that way. She herself was amazed at the number of figures displayed around the room. Soon after, Feimatsu discovered Odyssey, the world's first home video game console. Meanwhile, Niwaka asked Madame whether Feimatsu was no longer human. Just as Madame was about to answer, Professor Tsujin suddenly appeared. He introduced himself with a ridiculously long name, so Feimatsu decided to just call him Professor. Tsujin explained that Feimatsu had actually died, but Matoma had revived him through the Fate Transcendence ritual, turning him into a high-class Bud One under her control. Now, Feimatsu possessed incredible strength, powerful enough to defeat ordinary Bud Ones in a single blow. The professor also explained that high-level Bud Ones created by Hazoku were far stronger than regular ones. Tsujin asked Madame whether the ritual had gone smoothly, knowing how much she disliked performing it. Niwaka finally understood that Feimatsu was no longer human. She remembered their father once saying Feimatsu had failed as a person, and the thought made her sad. Tsujin encouraged Feimatsu not to think negatively, telling him that he was actually fortunate to have evolved into a higher being. Feimatsu then asked what would happen if he removed his clothes, since the enemies he had defeated earlier had turned back to normal after their clothes came off. Madame told him he would find out on his own later. Tamatsu also wondered how he was supposed to take a bath if he couldn't remove his clothes. Tatsujin said the base had a special shower room he had personally built. When Tamatsu pulled open the curtain, to his shock, Orisa was already there, and the situation quickly became awkward. Madame immediately scolded him, embarrassed by the misunderstanding. She reminded Tamatsu that, as her subordinate, the Bud Ones would now target him. That meant he had to fight and join the Community Defense Group, a volunteer team dedicated to protecting Akihabara. Most members were regular citizens who volunteered to help, though some, like Madame, devoted themselves fully to hunting the Bud Ones. Suddenly, Orisa appeared again, calling the whole thing so cool. Madame, flustered, tried to cover her up while keeping the situation under control. Tamatsu decided to stay at the base, realizing he couldn't leave Akihabara anyway. Niwaka was confused as to why he would live there, but Tamatsu explained he couldn't go home and would live with Matome for now. Madame reluctantly agreed. Niwaka worried their parents would be concerned, but Tamatsu asked her to tell them he had found a lifelong job. Niwaka said their mother might understand, but their father probably wouldn't approve. Madame told Tamatsu to get ready for their next mission, while Orisa cheered excitedly, so much that her towel almost slipped, causing another round of chaos. Tatsujin mentioned that there was still one free room upstairs, and although Madame hesitated about living together with Tamatsu, Tatsujin assured her that Tamatsu, while a bit clueless, was a good person at heart. Madame finally agreed and told Tamatsu he would officially work as part of the Community Defense Group, following her orders from now on. She asked him to clean up the room upstairs and informed everyone that their next mission would begin the next morning at 7. Niwaka could only hope that Tamatsu would be alright. The next morning, Madame walked together with Tamatsu and Orisa. Madame was puzzled about why Orisa was tagging along with them. Orisa explained that she had joined the public welfare group, which made Madame wonder who had even allowed her to join. Orisa asked Matome not to be so stubborn, saying she already knew that Madame was the one who repaired the damaged figurines. Madame admitted that she felt bad for the shop. She'd also apologized to Orisa because the day before she had mistaken her for one of the Bud Ones and attacked her right away. Suddenly, Orisa hugged Matome tightly and said she wanted to be her teammate. Out of nowhere, Tamatsu announced that he had already decided on a name for their team. In fact, he had thought of it since yesterday. Matome immediately disagreed, saying the name sounded awful, but Tamatsu insisted that it was a combination of all their names. Even so, Madame firmly refused. A moment later, members of the Akihabara Public Safety Group arrived. They wanted to ask about the violent incidents that had occurred around Akihabara the day before, especially since there was information suggesting that Madame and Tamatsu had been involved. They were also curious about why Tamatsu was always seen with Matome. Maybe he was part of the organization too. Tamatsu explained that he and Matome were part of a team called Electric Mayonnaise. Orisa quickly pointed out that her name wasn't included in that team name, so Tamatsu decided to change it to Electric Mayonnaise and Friends. Madame got angry and hit him repeatedly, refusing to accept such a ridiculous name. Hinjiro didn't care much about what the team was called, but he found it strange that members of a public organization were the ones causing incidents. Shohei scolded them for stirring up trouble in Akihabara, a place that already had an unspoken rule about maintaining order. Madame urged Tamatsu to leave right away, but before going, Tamatsu told them not to underestimate their team. Orisa acted cheerfully and told them not to worry too much about it. Later that day, Madame and the others went to a cafe to talk about the Bud Ones incident. Tamatsu was confused because online news reports claimed that a cosplayer had gone berserk instead. Madame explained that their enemies had used something called Kurobug to create many allies. She believed that they were trying to take control of Akihabara and that their organization was known as Metronica. Madame was convinced that their main base had to be somewhere within the district. Tamatsu pointed out that it would be pointless to fight the enemy without knowing their exact location. Madame said she didn't care, she just wanted to protect the city. Orisa agreed, saying she also wanted to defend this place full of amazing things. Tamatsu, however, couldn't help but think about shopping while he was still in Akihabara. Instead of that, he had been patrolling since morning, and since none of them were being paid, he wondered how they were supposed to survive like this. It turned out that Tatsujin's Research Institute had been providing them with some funding, but it wasn't enough to cover the rent for their base. When Tamatsu asked how they were supposed to make a living, Madame told him he should find a part-time job. Not long after, Momo appeared and approached Tamatsu. Momo was a well-known freelance waitress famous for her legendary service. Orisa was thrilled to meet her in person. Momo then suggested a good place where Tamatsu could find a side job. They soon visited the Mashiro agency, where Tamatsu asked for an easy job that paid well. The agency handed him a flyer, but both Madame and Orisa didn't trust it. The agency staff said they weren't responsible for any of the information on it. Madame commented that most of the sensors Tatsujin had made were basically useless anyway. Tamatsu decided he should head to the Eshigoya Tokyo Military Goods Store, which was looking for part-time employees. When they arrived, the place was packed with people. It seemed like military-themed items were really popular at the moment. Orisa mentioned that thanks to certain admirals and tank girls, the military theme was always trending. Tenmatsu, however, thought it was just a bunch of low-level fans looking for the latest model kits. Orisa teased him, saying he was also a hardcore military otaku himself. Suddenly, Tenchao appeared and said that he didn't have any valuable goods to sell to those customers. He fired his weapon into the air, leaving Tenmatsu completely confused about what was going on. Out of nowhere, ghostly military spirits appeared, capturing and possessing the visitors in the store. The sensor device detected an intense reaction from Tenchao. It turned out that he was actually the leader of the military-type Bud Ones. Matome declared that Tenchao was a high-class Bud One and urged Tenmatsu to fight alongside her. Orisa, full of excitement, joined the battle too. Together, they managed to defeat many of the Bud Ones. But Tenchao ordered his soldiers to take down Matome and her team. Chaos erupted, and people started fleeing the building in panic. Meanwhile, Masato was on a nearby rooftop with Fukame recording everything that was happening below. Meanwhile, a squad of Bud One's soldiers opened fire on Tenmatsu and his friends. Orisa quickly jumped toward the soldiers and kicked one of them, even managing to snatch his weapon. Matome was surprised that Orisa could pull that off. The three of them moved forward to attack Tenchao. Tenchao soon realized that Tenmatsu and Matome were immune to his soldiers' regular weapons, so he ordered his troops to switch to special ammunition. The next volley tore through Tenmatsu's and Matome's clothes, and Tenmatsu felt his body burning from the strange effect. It turned out those bullets were designed to shred clothing. Matome told Tenmatsu to fall back. The three of them quickly jumped out of the store. Not long after, Tsurubashi and his group arrived, accusing them of causing trouble. Shohei refused to let smugglers like them run wild, saying it could damage the reputation of the Chuodore community. Suddenly, several grenades were thrown from the store, forcing everyone to run for cover as explosions shook the area. Tsurubashi was confused about what kind of forces were stationed above the store. Matome explained that the attackers were Bud Ones. Kozakura thought it was just a myth, but Matome insisted that Akihabara was in danger and that they had to protect it. Orisa added that Matome's team was also defending Akihabara, just like Chuodori. She then hugged Tsurubashi and asked him to be friendly, since they were all members of the same community. Tenmatsu urged Orisa to leave, but Tsurubashi suddenly agreed to help. Although his teammates were hesitant, Tsurubashi reminded them that even if they didn't believe in the Bud Ones, keeping Akihabara peaceful was still their duty. Orisa was thrilled, while Tenmatsu thought the more people they had, the more exciting things would get, especially since he already had a plan for the next battle. Orisa was full of energy and ready to fight alongside them. When they reached the front of the store, Orisa kicked down the line of guarding soldiers. Matome was amazed since she was used to fighting alone. As soon as they entered, they started facing the Bud One's soldiers head-on, returning fire while Matome swung her baseball bat to take them down. Matome asked Tenmatsu to deal with the store manager, Tenchao, while she handled the Kurobug soldiers. Tenmatsu asked why Tenchao was doing all this. Tenchao replied that he had no use for unfaithful, trend-chasing people, claiming his store was meant only for experienced elites. He said most of those wannaves would become his pawns in taking over Akihabara. Tenmatsu told him he should treat newcomers better, reminding him that he probably once thought every Japanese fighter plane was called Type 0. Embarrassed, Tenchao tried to deny it and opened fire on Tenmatsu, but Tenmatsu quickly used his clothes for protection, leaped at Tenchao, and pulled off his outfit, ending the fight in an instant. It turned out Tenmatsu then borrowed the clothes from Tsurubashi for protection. However, once he removed Tenchao's outfit, Tenmatsu suddenly vanished. Matome realized that people possessed by the Kurobug would return to normal humans once their clothes were removed, but high-ranking Bud Ones and Hazoku would disappear entirely when that happened. Matome apologized for what had happened, but Tenmatsu's spirit remained high. He said he needed to enjoy life while he could and wanted to buy lots of things so he wouldn't have any regrets. He even decided to look for a job to earn money, rushing off to an agency office. Matome was baffled by Tenmatsu's reckless enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Orisa had successfully gathered and cared for the victims who had turned back into normal humans. News outlets soon reported that the chaos in Akihabara was a clash between otaku factions. The report was aired by Masato on his channel. After finishing the broadcast, Masato admitted that the story felt a bit exaggerated, but it was actually Fukame who had ordered him to present it that way. Fukame couldn't believe that a high-ranking Matronica member had been defeated so easily, and she began preparing her next plan. That day, Niwaka was watching Ayo's concert performance on TV. Tenmatsu, sitting nearby, didn't seem to recognize the idol at all. Orisa then explained that Ayo was a popular Akihabara idol who used to be the lead singer for GNZ34. She gained her fame thanks to her sweet stage presence and her cool, composed attitude during fan handshake events. The moment Tenmatsu laid eyes on Ayo, he immediately fell for her charm and became one of her biggest fans. He even went to see her concert in person. When he came back home after the concert, Niwaka was shocked by how Famitsu looked, though Orisa actually liked his new appearance. Matome, on the other hand, scolded him because he was supposed to be on patrol with her that day. Famitsu apologized for skipping out on their duty. Even though it was already late at night, Matome still invited Famitsu to patrol with her, but he refused, saying he wanted to watch the concert review broadcast. For him, the most important thing was to experience Io's performance live and then join the fan discussions afterward. Famitsu admitted that the concert had been absolutely incredible. Frustrated, Matome stormed off. That night, Matome went to a burger shop and ended up eating a huge amount of burgers. She was still upset and thought that while she was sitting there doing nothing, their enemies might already be moving forward with their plans. She began to regret saving Famitsu that one time. Her face turned red when she remembered the kiss they had shared. Meanwhile, Famitsu was at a cafe listening to music when Cage showed up. Cage couldn't believe Famitsu had suddenly gotten into idol music. He suggested Famitsu should try listening to higher quality tracks and offered him his own earphones to test. After trying them, Famitsu became obsessed with finding the best audio gear possible. He went to a store and was shocked by how expensive the headphones were. The shop clerk told him they weren't just headphones, they were ear speakers. In the end, Famitsu bought the ear speakers. But it turned out that everything had been part of a plan by Cage and the shop owner to make him buy their products. Sure enough, Famitsu ended up buying a ton of equipment, high-end speakers, the latest audio tech, limited edition vinyl records, record players, pure gold audio cables, and even a mysterious stone said to boost sound quality when placed on the player because it enhanced sound waves with special particles. Later, Famitsu proudly told his friends that after chasing the true essence of audio, he had discovered a simple truth. Idol music is best enjoyed live. His friends couldn't believe it, especially since he had spent so much money on audio equipment. But Famitsu explained that nothing could match the energy at a live concert, the unity, the passion, the way everyone's focus comes together for one person. That, he said, was what being a true idol fan was all about. However, when he got home from the concert, he found a huge credit card bill waiting for him. With no other choice, Famitsu went to an agency to look for part-time work. When asked what kind of job he wanted, he said anything would do, as long as it paid well and the money came fast. The agency gave him a job that seemed perfect for his situation. Meanwhile, Matome was frustrated that Famitsu had completely abandoned electric mayonnaise, first for an idol obsession and now for a part-time job. Niwaka explained that her brother tended to forget everything else whenever he got fixated on something. Matome apologized to Niwaka for making her take Famitsu's place on patrol. Orisa, however, said she understood why Famitsu liked idols. To her, idols represented dreams and everyone adored them. She even admitted that she wanted to chase the world of idols herself. Suddenly, a woman stopped them and asked if any of them wanted to become idols. The three of them screamed in surprise. The woman invited them to talk in a cafe. She introduced herself as Chibusa from Great Emperor Records. Iwaka and Matome didn't recognize her, but Orisa immediately knew who she was. Orisa explained that Chibusa was a major figure in the idol industry, famous for her captivating performances and for producing hit dramas inspired by her own experiences, often touching on the darker sides of the entertainment world. One of her shows, Why They Don't Pay, had been a huge success. Chibusa was a legendary media producer and she seemed impressed that Orisa knew so much about her. Chibusa was accompanied by Muramura, her personal photographer. She told the three girls that she saw untapped potential in them, like diamonds waiting to be polished, and she believed they could be the next big idol trio to shine in the future. She asked if they were interested in debuting as idols. Niwaka was confused by how sudden the offer was, and Matome immediately declined, saying the three of them had an important mission to focus on and couldn't waste time chasing fame. But before they could continue, Orisa quickly covered their mouths and excitedly accepted the offer. She was confident that the three of them could become Akihabara's next big stars. And just like that, Chibusa decided to make them idols. During a training session, Matome used the stage name Ma, Niwaka went by Ne, and Orisa kept her real name as her stage name. Together, the three formed an idol trio called Manias. Chibusa reminded them to maintain their stamina because, according to her, an idol could never succeed without a healthy body. They started doing physical exercises, beginning with jump rope practice while Famitsu was busy with his own job. After that, the trio moved on to practicing fan handshakes, where they had to keep smiling no matter what. At the same time, Famitsu was cleaning windows on a tall building. Next, Matome and her friends practiced climbing walls. Matome questioned whether rock climbing was really necessary to become an idol. Orisa admitted she didn't know either, but she believed it might be part of the new idol standards at the time. Still, Orisa gave it her best effort, full of energy, while Muramura kept recording their activities. Meanwhile, Famitsu continued his delivery job around town. Later on, Madame and her team had a photo shoot. Many photographers surrounded them, taking countless pictures as the trio tried to pose in cute and cheerful ways. They were a bit embarrassed when people started taking pictures from lower angles. Meanwhile, Feimatsu was still busy arranging flower bouquets at his workplace. The next day, the three girls were filmed eating snacks for a promotional video. The scene's direction felt awkward and overly suggestive, and they didn't really understand why they had to pose in such a way. Muramura explained that it was supposed to be an image video to showcase the group's charm. That same day, Feimatsu visited an agency again to look for a better-paying job. The agency offered him a cleaning job at another building and hinted that he might discover something special while working there. At the same time, Madame and her friends were told to prepare for a photo shoot wearing swimsuits. Inside the dressing room, they spent some time choosing outfits. Madame hesitated and said she didn't feel comfortable wearing a swimsuit. Arisa scolded her, asking her to stay committed since they had already come this far. Madame clarified that it wasn't about being unwilling, she just didn't want to reveal too much of herself. Niwaka immediately understood and supported her. Madame explained again that she simply couldn't expose too much skin, so Arisa decided to help by finding a more modest swimsuit for her. Arisa confidently wore a bright, stylish swimsuit. Niwaka chose a frilly one, and she also added stockings and gloves to cover more of her skin. Once everyone was ready, Muramura told them to begin shooting. Niwaka noticed a few older men nearby and quietly asked who they were. Muramura assured them not to worry, saying that those men were just part of the production crew in charge of the water effects. Niwaka nervously imagined them spraying water during the shoot. As filming began, Niwaka showed her cutest smile. Matome still looked serious and a bit stiff, so Muramura asked her to relax and smile more. Arisa, on the other hand, was full of confidence and energy, giving expressive and lively poses in front of the camera. Then, Muramura requested a few more creative poses. Arisa tried striking some confident and dramatic ones, clearly enjoying the moment. However, when Muramura suggested she make her outfit a little more revealing for artistic purposes, Madame and Niwaka immediately stopped her. They both said that their request was completely inappropriate and crossed the line. Madame firmly told Arisa not to do anything she might regret. Arisa suddenly realized that if she went along with that, it could ruin her career in the long run. Muramura complained that they were interrupting the shoot and ruining the best part. Chibusa then stepped in and repeated that idols could only succeed with good physical appeal. Niwaka was surprised, saying Chibusa had never mentioned anything like that before. Matome angrily responded that this was nothing more than a trick to lure people into something shady. In the end, Madame decided to stop the shoot and urge her friends to leave the set together. Muramura said that doing something like that definitely wasn't a good choice. Chibusa even warned that she would use her power if the three of them insisted on ignoring her words. Then Chibusa and Muramura revealed who they really were. They were Bud Ones, planning to take control of Akihabara by using a shocking revelation about an idol as their puppet. Arisa was stunned. It all started to make sense since she had already felt something strange from the beginning. Chibusa actually wanted the three of them to keep chasing their dream of becoming idols, but things had gone far from what she originally hoped for. She ordered her subordinates to attack them, and the Bud Ones immediately launched their assault. Matome and Arisa, however, easily threw the Bud Ones into the swimming pool. Since Niwaka couldn't fight, Matome told her to run away. Niwaka started running, but she tripped, and the Bud Ones began closing in. Terrified, Niwaka screamed for help. A few men nearby tried to block the Bud Ones to protect her, but they were too weak and were quickly defeated. The Bud Ones moved closer to Niwaka. In panic, she shouted for her older brother at the top of her voice. In an instant, the Bud Ones were wiped out. Feimatsu had arrived just in time to save her. Niwaka couldn't believe her brother was really there. Feimatsu quickly checked to make sure she was okay. Chibusa then approached and demanded to know who Feimatsu really was. Feimatsu replied that he was just a part-time janitor who cleaned up trouble, and that included people like them. Madame told him to stop acting cool and just help them out. Arisa jumped in to attack Muramura, but Muramura's counter hit sent her flying back. Meanwhile, Feimatsu used his broom handle to face off against the Bud Ones. Muramura kept attacking Matome, but Matome skillfully dodged every blow. She told Feimatsu that Muramura was their commander and that he needed to take him down. After clearing out the Bud Ones, Feimatsu turned his attention to Chibusa, but defeating her wasn't easy. Chibusa was strong and incredibly fast. She even used a rapid strike technique that shattered the broom handle in Feimatsu's hands. Not long after, Feimatsu managed to grab the edge of Chibusa's outfit, weakening her control. At the same time, Muramura forcefully pulled at Arisa's costume, causing her to fall and hurriedly cover herself. Madame realized then that both Chibusa and Muramura were high-level Bud Ones. She was fighting Muramura alone, and her outfit was torn during the struggle. Feimatsu, worried about her, tried to run to her side, but the Bud ones blocked his way. He managed to push through them easily, thanks to his experience squeezing through crowds at idol concerts, and caught Muramura's arm. Muramura pulled away and the two started battling head-on. Feimatsu went for Muramura's outfit again using his signature spinning move, a wild, powerful technique that sent Muramura and the other Bug ones flying. The impact caused Muramura's outfit to come off and he fell into the pool before vanishing. Niwaka, Orisa, and Madama cheered with relief, happy that Feimatsu had managed to defeat Muramura. Shortly after, Chibusa regained her senses, returning to normal and having no idea what she had done. Madama then explained everything to her. Chibusa apologized for all the trouble she had caused. Madama assured her that it wasn't her fault, the Bug ones had been controlling her actions. Chibusa admitted she didn't remember much about what had happened under their control, but she did recognize real talent in the three of them. As an apology, she offered to become their producer. Madame and Niwaka were shocked, while Orisa couldn't believe such an opportunity was suddenly right in front of her. The next day, the three of them performed on stage. They sang and danced with full energy. Their performance was truly impressive. Their natural talent shone through. By the time the song ended, they were all out of breath. Only 6 people showed up to their concert, but everyone clapped enthusiastically. Feimatsu gave them a thumbs up, showing how much he enjoyed it. Orisa was surprised that their first concert had such a small audience. It had been arranged so suddenly that they hadn't had time to promote it properly. Still, Madame didn't seem bothered at all. She smiled, seeing how happy Feimatsu was with their performance. One day, Feimatsu set up a beam antenna on a tower so he could pick up broadcasts from both Hokkaido and Okinawa. Madame asked Niwaka what Feimatsu was doing, and Niwaka explained that he was installing an antenna for amateur radio. Feimatsu had been into radios ever since grade school, and after spending so much time around the shops in Akihabara, it seemed like his old enthusiasm had come back. Madame wondered if they really needed an antenna that big. Tatsujin, however, seemed excited about it. The weather was perfect, and she wanted to tune in to different frequencies. As Tatsujin adjusted the dial, the antenna suddenly spun around and hit Feimatsu on the head. He lost his balance, but luckily, the safety rope caught him before he fell. Feimatsu scolded Tatsujin for being careless, and she quickly apologized. Later that day, Feimatsu went to a store while staying in touch with Orisa over the radio. At that moment, Orisa was watching their target and waiting for Feimatsu's signal. Niwaka, who was standing near the stairs, asked if Orisa had found anything good. Feimatsu told Orisa to stay put so he could double-check first, but Orisa insisted they move fast before losing the item. Feimatsu told her not to rush, but Orisa didn't want to wait any longer. She went ahead and grabbed it, an extremely rare item for a bargain price. Orisa was thrilled with her find, but Feimatsu scolded her again after discovering another store selling it for 120 yen less. Niwaka asked Feimatsu to lower his voice before he drew attention to them. Madame couldn't understand why they were using radio communication when they were all standing so close together. It turned out that in the city their transmitters only worked within a 30-meter radius. Afterward, Feimatsu and his friends went to Fuji Radio Electronics, where he planned to upgrade their communication system. The store had everything. Legendary models like the True to 830, Yaejizu GT 101Z, FGDX 9000, and many others. Madame and the others couldn't believe how excited Feimatsu was while picking out radios. He was especially thrilled when he found a vacuum tube amp, the Yaejizu SL 2,100,572B, with automatic tuning and digital signal features. He even started dancing with it in his arms out of pure joy. A moment later, Niwaka picked up an air traffic broadcast. She was shocked, wondering if it was some kind of classified transmission and whether they were even allowed to listen to it. Orisa casually said that listening for fun wasn't really a problem. Soon after, Feimatsu discovered a new device that could send pictures digitally and connect through VoIP. Madame couldn't understand why they needed a transceiver when they already had smartphones. Feimatsu explained that radio waves behave differently each day and they needed to sharpen their skills, technology, and creativity to catch them accurately. Amateur radio, he said, brought back a sense of adventure and curiosity that modern people had forgotten. It could connect people all around the world, anytime and anywhere. To Feimatsu, simple radio waves created a kind of joy that smartphones never could. Smartphones were convenient, sure, but they only worked within the digital spaces created by corporations. Depending too much on them, he said, meant people might lose their ability to think independently. Feimatsu even covered his smartphone with a small plastic casing as if to make a point. Suddenly, a deafening sound wave burst through the air. Every smartphone and computer around them exploded at once. A massive tower had appeared, blasting out shockwaves powerful enough to blow up electronic devices across nearby buildings. Madame was stunned. She didn't remember ever seeing a tower that huge before. It looked just like Tokyo Tower. Orisa pointed out that it might actually be the legendary Akihabara Tower. Then a voice echoed from above. A girl standing at the top of the tower declared that this was indeed the legendary Akihabara Tower, also known as Tokyo Tower 2. She announced that she and her followers would reclaim the dreams that had been taken from them by the Sumida Ward. Famitsu and the others were shocked when they realized the whole thing was the work of the Bug Ones. The girl's name was Denko. Denko explained that the Bug Ones' special radio waves transmitted from the tower had destroyed all communication devices. The tower's signal was stronger than any ordinary radio tower. It was going to be the most powerful broadcast tower in all of Japan. Hearing that, Famitsu and his friends knew they couldn't just stand by. They rushed toward the tower to stop her. Denko immediately unleashed a powerful microwave burst. The blast caused Famitsu, Madame, and Arisa's clothes to spark and burn slightly from the heat. They quickly retreated, feeling the intense sting across their bodies. Denko laughed as they ran, sending another wave of energy their way. Realizing they were at a disadvantage, Famitsu and the group decided to fall back to their base. The attack's strength was so intense that it even scorched several nearby buildings as they escaped. At their head-out, Niwaka was treating Famitsu, Madame, and Arisa. Tatsujin mentioned that dealing with enemies who use microwave waves was proving to be quite troublesome. At that time, Akihabara was in chaos. Smartphones and computers were exploding because of the strange waves. According to Famitsu, the only way to stop the signal might be to destroy the tower, but they couldn't even get close to it. Arisa recalled what Denko had said earlier, that the tower was called Tokyo Tower 2, and that it was also connected to the idea of taking back their dreams. If that was the case, Tatsujin decided to reach out to her mentor in Tsukuba for help. It turned out that Famitsu had once been a researcher at a cutting-edge science center in Tsukuba. Arisa was surprised and said Tatsujin sounded like an elite. Famitsu then asked how Tatsujin had known about the existence of the Bug Ones in Akihabara, and Tatsujin began to tell her story. A few years ago, before the Tsukuba Express even started operating, the Tsukuba Science Center was home to researchers from all over the world. Even though the Bug Ones hadn't become active yet, the researchers already knew that there were Bug Ones hiding behind the scenes in Akihabara. Tatsujin had been working with Denko, the owner of the tower, to study them. They were guided and supported by their teacher, Professor Yagyuta, who was the lead researcher among all the scientists, including those studying paranormal phenomena. He was the one who recommended that Denko and Tatsujin go to Akihabara to study the Bug Ones in their natural environment. Arisa was deeply moved after hearing about Tatsujin's past. Famitsu then asked how Tokyo Tower 2 even came to exist. Tatsujin explained that during their research, she and Denko discovered that the Bug Ones emitted faint but unusual radio waves. Because of that, they decided to pursue a special project. About 10 years ago, there had been plans to build a replacement for Tokyo Tower 2, in Akihabara. With a large enough antenna, they could easily detect and analyze those faint radio signals. Denko and Professor Yagyuta had poured all their wealth into trying to bring the tower to Akihabara. Tatsujin explained that Professor Yagyuta had deep knowledge about radio waves and would probably have a solution for their current problem. Unfortunately, after losing all of his personal fortune, the professor left for Brazil and started working as a prospector in the Amazon to raise money for his research. Madame and the others were shocked to hear that. So Professor Yagyuta was still somewhere out there beyond Brazil, but because of the tower's interference, they couldn't send text messages or emails. That's why they needed an alternative method of communication. Famitsu suggested contacting Professor Yagyuta through radio waves since radio signals could be hacked and were much more reliable. Tatsujin agreed. That was exactly why she had asked Famitsu to set up the antenna. Madame wondered aloud if it was even possible to reach Brazil with a radio signal since it was on the other side of the planet. But Famitsu was confident they could do it. They started studying radio waves together. Tatsujin explained that communicating with Brazil wouldn't be easy. They had most of the equipment they needed, but the one thing they couldn't control was the weather in the ionosphere. She even joked that if praying could control the sun, she would be praying all day long. Surprisingly, Arisa offered to pray to the gods for help, though Famitsu doubted any god would listen to her prayer. They decided to wait patiently for the right wind conditions. Once everything was ready, they would send the radio signal to Brazil. As they all knew, radio waves travel straight and can't directly reach the other side of the Earth, so they would have to use the ionosphere above the sky. The ionosphere reflects radio waves in the same way a mirror reflects light, creating a chain of reflections that can carry the signal to the other side of the world. However, South America was very far away, and voice communication would be unrealistic. They would need to use Morse code instead, which could still work under less than ideal conditions. They knew they wouldn't be able to communicate unless Professor Yagyuta himself replied in Morse code. Famitsu sent a signal to check whether the radio waves had reached Professor Yagyuta, but it still didn't work. Tatsujin asked Niwaka to switch the coaxial cable, told Matoma to grab the toolbox, and asked Arisa to check the rotator on the tower. Arisa immediately climbed the tower and prayed to the ionosphere, but even by nightfall, there was still no success. The next morning, Momo showed up bringing pizza pops and garlic chicken. Famitsu and the others woke up and were thrilled to see the food. It turned out that Niwaka had ordered the meat pizza before heading to school. Momo, who worked in a pizza place that month because of a maid program event, looked around and couldn't believe how serious they all seemed. Tamatsu explained that they were carrying out a complex communication mission. Momo realized that the signals from the new tower had been causing trouble all over Akihabara. She asked if any of their devices had been affected. Tasujin said that since they were under the tank, the effects had weakened, and she had also built a protective wall. Momo walked closer to the equipment and pressed the wave transmitter. Suddenly, a response came through from Professor Yagyuta. Tamatsu quickly listened to the Morse code message the professor sent and asked Tasujin to write it down. The code spelled ALMHK. None of them knew what it meant. Tamatsu guessed it might be an acronym, maybe even a way of saying thanks. Tasujin thought the letters might need to be rearranged in a certain pattern. Arisa admitted she didn't understand either and said she'd just finished eating chicken while crushing the aluminum foil that came in. Tasujin's eyes lit up as if she suddenly understood what ALMHK meant. Excited, she ran inside to look for materials but realized she didn't have enough, so she asked Momo to bring her an order of 100 garlic chicken meals. Meanwhile, Denko was laughing joyfully because he had finally taken control of Akihabara's radio waves, fulfilling his long-time dream. He had once watched a tower being built in Narihirabashi, which made him lose his motivation to live. Fortunately, thanks to Matronica, he had managed to build a tower of his own. Not long after, one of his subordinates reported that an unknown shape, something that looked like an ancient alien, was approaching. It turned out to be Tamatsu, Madame, and Arisa, all wearing aluminum foil suits as protective armor. They had come to take down Denko's tower. Denko launched microwave waves toward them, but the attack didn't work. The aluminum armor completely blocked the signal. Denko was shocked to see that. Tamatsu and his team prepared to move in and face him. Tasujin was grateful to Professor Yagyuta, who had given them the answer, Arumahaku, meaning aluminum foil. Aluminum could fully block microwave radiation. At first, Tamatsu doubted that a single sheet of foil would be enough, but they had used a huge amount. Each suit required about 300 millimeters of aluminum foil. They had gone through piles of garlic chicken just to collect enough foil to make the armor. Tasujin was confident that Tamatsu and the others could defeat Denko and his crew. As they got closer, Denko ordered his men to aim for their opponent's eyes, the only spot not covered by armor. When the shots were fired, Tamatsu and the others turned around and walked backward toward the tower. In a quick move, they managed to pull Denko's outfit, and in an instant, the tower collapsed and exploded. Fukame and Masato covered the event, assuming it was just an overly enthusiastic promotional stunt by an antenna shop. Tasujin then approached Denko. It had been a long time since they last met. She asked why he had done all that. Denko explained that 3 days earlier his dream tower had been destroyed, leaving him hopeless. He had wandered across the country and ended up in Akihabara. He even considered ending his life, but Fukame stopped him, asking him to live and promising to help him achieve his dream. When they shook hands, Denko was transformed into one of the bugged ones. By the time he regained his senses, he realized he had been spreading disruptive waves from the tower. Overcome with regret, Denko cried, apologizing for what he had done to the people of Akihabara. Tasujin promised to reach out to some contacts to help clear Denko's name from the incident. Denko cried in Tasujin's arms and she invited him to go out for a drink and talk things over. The next day, Tamatsu hosted a broadcast from Studio Electro Mayo. The special guests that day were the idol trio, Maneus. They chatted about their new song titled Match for 3000. Madelman was curious why they were suddenly hosting a radio show. Tamatsu explained that it was a free promotion for Maneus, and besides, their broadcast reached all the way to Brazil. Meanwhile, Tasujin quietly looked at an old photo of Denko and Professor Yagyuta together. That day, Tamatsu was hanging out at the game center playing a mahjong arcade game. But as the game went on, an image of a woman started to appear, slowly taking off her clothes. Yuaka was shocked and couldn't believe Tamatsu was still playing a game like that. Tamatsu tried to explain that he was only using it as practice for fighting the Bud ones, since, according to him, there might come a time when he'd have to face them in a mahjong match. When the woman in the game started to undress, Tamatsu quickly covered the screen and told Niwaka to go play the crane game instead. Niwaka was grateful when Tamatsu gave her some money, and she got super excited running off to play. As the self-proclaimed ace fighter, Tamatsu swore that he would play any game to victory without letting his opponent win a single round. In reality, though, Tamatsu lost his final mahjong match and decided to switch to another game. The arcade was filled with tons of classic titles, and he found himself drawn to an old favorite, Street Fighter II. He hadn't been very good at fighting games in the past, but by now he figured he should have improved. He started playing, realizing the game was much faster than he remembered. At first, he couldn't recall the special moves, but eventually it came back to him, and he managed to win a round. Suddenly, a kid walked up and joined the game. Tamatsu was surprised that a child would even bother with such an old game. Confident, he assumed he could beat the kid easily, but it turned out the kid was incredibly skilled. Without giving Tematsu a single chance to land a hit, the kid completely crushed him. Tematsu was frustrated, feeling like he'd been wiped out in one-sided fashion, and he ended up blaming the machine. The kid introduced herself as Matsuko and calmly told him that blaming the machine wouldn't make anyone a better player. Then she walked away, leaving Tematsu puzzled. He had the strange feeling that he'd seen her somewhere before. Meanwhile, Niwaka was happily focused on the crane game, and she actually managed to win a full set of Lao's quintuplet plushies. Not long after, Tematsu walked up to her. Niwaka proudly showed off her prize, but suddenly a glass barrier appeared and sliced through the plushie Tematsu was holding. Both of them were shocked, and Niwaka froze in fear. Out of nowhere, a giant mechanical claw reached down from the ceiling and grabbed her, lifting her up into the air. Niwaka screamed for help, and when Tematsu tried to smash the glass to rescue her, he noticed a warning message saying that anyone who hit the machine would be banned from the arcade. Before he could figure out what to do, the ceiling closed up again, taking Niwaka with it. At that moment, Matsuko appeared once more and commented that Tematsu had matured since he didn't break the machine this time. Tematsu, confused and annoyed, had no idea what she was talking about. A few seconds later, Tematsu received a message from an unknown sender saying that his little sister had been taken. Furious, Tematsu turned to confront Matsuko, but she vanished before he could even react. Shortly after, Arisa contacted him and warned that Niwaka was in serious danger. Tematsu rushed back to their base, trying to figure out a plan to save her. That's when another threatening message appeared. The kidnapper demanded that if Tematsu wanted Niwaka back, he would have to enter the massively popular Street Fighter V tournament and win. The kidnapper had already signed him up. Tematsu was shocked. It was clear this whole thing had been planned in advance, with Niwaka taken as leverage. Arisa explained that the Street Fighter V Weiwei Cup Evolution fight would take place the next day in Akihabara. The tournament would feature many famous gamers, and the champion would get to face Matsuko, who was now a well-known pro. Arisa told Tematsu that Matsuko wasn't just famous for her skills. She was also considered one of the most beautiful and brilliant players in the gaming world, having already won tournaments across the globe. That's when Tematsu realized Matsuko was the same girl he'd met at the arcade, and she was the one who had taken Niwaka. The team reviewed footage from Matsuko's recent matches. After watching closely, Madama commented that the moves Matsuko used weren't normal, they weren't human techniques at all. Madama was convinced Matsuko must be a bugged one. Tematsu couldn't believe it. The so-called genius of the gaming world turned out to be someone using bugged one powers. It was incredibly disappointing. Madama asked if Tematsu thought he could really defeat Matsuko. Arisa stepped in, saying he'd have to beat several famous pro gamers first if he wanted to reach her in the tournament. Tematsu admitted he wasn't exactly great at fighting games, but Arisa reminded him that, as Confucius once said, "You'll never know until you try." She encouraged him to give it everything he had. Motivated by her words, Tematsu vowed to do whatever it took to save Niwaka. Tatsujin had already guessed that Tematsu would say that. In fact, Tatsujin had anticipated it and had even built a special training machine to help Tematsu improve his fighting game skills. That afternoon, Tematsu was training by running on Tatsujin's custom-built machine. Madama was confused about how that kind of workout could possibly help with a fighting game. The machine spun too fast, causing Tematsu to lose his balance and fall. The next session was reflex training. Tatsujin used a tennis ball machine, but Arisa was the one swinging the racket. She kept missing, and the tennis balls ended up hitting Tematsu instead. Arisa tried again, confidently believing she could hit the ball this time, but she accidentally struck Tematsu right in the face instead. Next came the endurance training. Tematsu had to hang onto a rope while two sharks swam in the pool below. He couldn't hold on long enough and eventually fell into the water. Then came reaction speed training with a quiz game, pressure resistance training, and exercises to strengthen his body. At one point, he even had to endure simulated heat training by standing near a warm pole. Tematsu looked exhausted and wondered if he was going to collapse, but he refused to give up because he had to save Niwaka by defeating Matsuko. The next morning, Tematsu practiced by trying to crush a watermelon using only his index finger, and he actually did it. Tatsujin proudly announced that Tematsu had mastered the legendary 16 hits per second technique. Fired up and full of confidence, Tematsu was eager to take on Matsuko. That day, the Weiwei Cup Evolution Fight Tournament in Akihabara finally began. Koga served as the host, accompanied by a male commentator. Tematsu appeared calm, certain that he would win the tournament and face Matsuko. Arisa felt that the opponents looked pretty tough, but Tatsujin was sure that after all of Tematsu's training, no ordinary human gamer could beat him. To face Matsuko, Tematsu first had to make it to the finals. The first round began. Koga called up a gamer named Frog Ozma, a representative from the United States, to fight against Tematsu. Arisa and Madhoman cheered loudly, encouraging Tematsu to win. When the match started, Tematsu confidently said that he didn't have time to deal with minor opponents because his real target was Matsuko. However, to everyone's surprise, Frog Ozmo won the match. Tematsu couldn't believe it. He was completely defeated in the very first round. The shock hit him hard. To rescue his kidnapped little sister, Tematsu stayed up all night training for the Weiwei Evolution Fight Tournament. Even though he lost in the first round, he made an incredible comeback in the playoffs and knockout stages. To reach the final, Tematsu defeated Inferno, one of the strongest contenders, earning the right to challenge Matsukao, the genius gamer. When Matsukao and Tematsu finally faced each other, Tematsu declared that he would win this battle to save his sister. Matsukao didn't quite understand what he meant, but she didn't care much about that. What truly interested her was that she could sense something special about Tematsu, something that made her want to play seriously. The final match began. Tematsu's spirit burned brightly, and for a while he held the upper hand against Matsukao. He stayed calm under pressure, executed a perfect combo, and finished with a critical art. Tematsu won the first round, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Orisa and Matoma jumped with excitement, thrilled to see him take the lead. Suddenly, one of the spectators mentioned that Matsuko always used the first round to study her opponent's playstyle. Tatsujin didn't believe it at first. The spectator explained that in every best-of-3 match, Matsukao intentionally lost the first round to analyze her opponent's tactics. After that, she would mentally process the data and create a strategy to win the next rounds. It was said that Matsukao could adapt instantly, almost like her brain evolved into the perfect gaming processor. Tematsu couldn't believe that Matsukao had purposely thrown away the first round. Matsukao calmly stated that as a professional gamer, everything she did was part of her plan to win, and that nothing was wasted. Koga commented that Matsukao was showing incredible pride, and Matsukao herself admitted that Tematsu's skill level was beyond what she had expected. The second round began, and Tematsu was completely overwhelmed by Matsukao's true power. He could only defend for a short while before Matsukao decisively defeated him. The audience roared with excitement at her victory. Matsukao had shown her real strength. She won the round without even using a special move. Koga wondered aloud if the gap in their abilities was too large to overcome, while the commentator added that the greater the distance, the greater the challenge to bridge it. Tematsu realized that Matsukao truly was the strongest gamer. Matsukao, however, insisted that Tematsu's potential was still greater than he realized, but to claim victory, he needed to push himself even further. Suddenly, Matsukao took off her jacket, surprising Tematsu and exciting the entire crowd. Everyone started cheering enthusiastically. Matoma was confused, wondering why Matsukao would remove her clothing in the middle of a match. Orisa explained that it might be a kind of martial arts technique known as the strike of shame, a symbolic gesture meant to unleash one's hidden potential. According to Orisa, this technique had even appeared in history. During the era of the 16 Kingdoms, the legendary mahjong master Lord John Kioi was said to have used it. Later in Japan's Edo period, a shogi player named Lord Mataro supposedly did the same. Rumor had it that this technique was even coded into a computer program that once defeated a human champion named Yedail, despite the fact that mastering it was said to take over 30 years. Orisa admitted that Matsuko was indeed a genius. Matoma, however, was baffled. She couldn't believe that someone she had once thought of as one of the Bud Ones would resort to something so unpredictable. Tematsu was curious and asked if Matsukao didn't feel embarrassed, but Matsukao replied that she no longer carried any sense of shame. All she had left was her determination to win. As the crowd grew louder, the final round began. Tematsu struggled to keep up and couldn't react fast enough to Matsukao's attacks. Her moves were swift and unstoppable, leaving him with almost no openings. When Matsukao prepared to launch her ultimate move, Tematsu narrowly managed to dodge it. He felt cornered, unsure of what else he could possibly do, until he suddenly decided to follow Matsukao's lead and took off his jacket as well. Seeing that, Matoma shouted, warning him not to go that far since it could be dangerous for him. But Tematsu didn't care. He wanted to dedicate his youth to gaming, and he was ready to give it everything he had. Some of the audience even cheered him on. As the tension rose, Matsukao responded by removing her outer shirt too, drawing a collective gasp from the crowd. Both of them now stood in their undershirts, focused completely on the game. The match reached its peak. Every move, every reaction perfectly mirrored the other. Matsukao was thrilled to be fighting such a skilled opponent and confidently declared she would end the game right there. But Tematsu refused to lose. He wanted his own legend to begin that day. He stood upside down, spinning his body using only his hands, shocking Orisa, who realized all his years of training had been for that very moment. With fierce determination, Tematsu pressed the console buttons rapidly, channeling all his energy into one final burst of focus. In that moment, he managed to defeat Matsukao. The impact was so strong that Matsukao stumbled backward from her seat. The crowd erupted into cheers. Nobody could believe that Tematsu had actually beaten the reigning champion. Orisa was equally stunned and proud of his victory. As the excitement settled, Tematsu suddenly realized his body was burning from exhaustion, and the fact that he wasn't wearing much didn't help. Matsukao noticed and kindly offered him her jacket. She admitted that Tematsu's spirit and determination had truly outshone her that day. They shook hands respectfully. Tematsu reminded Matsuko of her promise to return his younger sister, Niwaka, but Matsuko looked puzzled. She had no idea what he was talking about. Just then, Madame quietly lifted Matsuko's hat, revealing her normal hair and showing that she wasn't one of the Bud ones after all. Tematsu was confused, realizing there must be someone else behind all of this. Suddenly, it became clear the announcer was the real Bud one. Without hesitation, Tematsu struck him with a single powerful blow that sent the announcer flying into the sky. With that, Koga stepped in to officially close the Weiwei Evolution Fight Akihabara event. Tematsu immediately rushed to find Niwaka. Together with his friends, he entered the room where hostages had been kept, only to see Niwaka calmly playing a video game. She admitted she couldn't finish it. Tematsu sighed in relief. She was safe. Madame couldn't believe it. After all the chaos they had gone through, Niwaka was just sitting there gaming like nothing happened. Tematsu smiled and offered to help her finish the game. That day, Tematsu was frustrated because his laptop suddenly showed a blue screen for the 10th time, right after the Winmato's OS updated automatically. He started thinking it might be time to get a new computer. With smartphones getting more popular, PCs have become less appealing among young people. Around that same time, new regulations for Akihabara residents had just been announced. The electronics store MoffMap promised to offer shop-built PCs with surprisingly low prices but high specs. The store owner, Barbara, confidently advertised that MoffMap would become a well-known brand across Japan. After seeing the ad on TV, Tematsu immediately decided to head to MoffMap. He was tempted by the deal but also thought it might be boring to have the same setup as everyone else. Suddenly, Cage showed up and suggested that Tematsu should try building his own PC instead. Cage explained that if Tematsu assembled it himself, it would be one of a kind, something truly personal. Tematsu liked the idea but admitted he had never built one before. Cage was surprised, especially since Tematsu was actually pretty skilled with analog machines. So Cage offered to help him out. They started shopping for parts, picking up a CPU and motherboard first. While browsing, they noticed a man walking into the store looking around for certain components. Once he left, Cage quietly pulled out an item from the pile the man had been looking through. It turned out that the guy was known as Jackal, a so-called parts hunter. He had a habit of going from shop to shop, finding good parts, hiding them under piles, and later buying them from whichever store sold them cheapest. Cage told Tematsu that following Jackal around was a clever way to score quality parts at bargain prices. Tematsu jokingly called it stealing Jackal's finds, but Cage laughed and said that when it comes to building PCs, it's all about survival of the fittest. The fastest builder wins. After buying a few more components, the two of them took a break and enjoyed some fish sandwiches. Tematsu thanked Cage, saying he managed to stay under budget thanks to him. Then they headed home, ready to start assembling the PC. When Tematsu finally turned it on, he realized he had forgotten to buy an operating system. He didn't want to use Winmato's again anyway. Just then, Tatsujin offered him a chance to try out a new OS she was developing called Drive AI Latex. Tematsu agreed and began installing it. After the installation finished, a visual of a girl appeared on the monitor and greeted him. Tematsu was amazed to see that the screen could actually talk. Tatsujin explained that it was a voice navigation feature, meaning the system could respond to spoken commands. Tematsu found it hard to believe. Tatsujin confidently said that her technical knowledge was probably among the best in the world. Unsure what to say to the monitor, Tematsu asked what he should do next. Tatsujin suggested giving the AI a name to make it feel more personal. Tematsu thought for a moment and decided to name the virtual girl Pukao. The computer immediately responded, recognizing the name. He then introduced himself, and Pukao identified him as her administrator. Overjoyed, Tematsu began chatting with her non-stop about all sorts of things. Meanwhile, Matome, Niwaka, and Arisa were enjoying a meal together. Niwaka mentioned that Tematsu seemed completely absorbed in talking with Pukao. Arisa laughed and said Tematsu kept asking the computer unnecessary questions, as if he couldn't stop talking to her. Matome shook her head, calling Tematsu foolish for wasting his time with the machine. Arisa teasingly asked if Matome might actually be jealous. Matome denied it, saying she was just frustrated because Akihabara was in danger, yet Tematsu was spending his time chatting instead of helping. She told Tematsu to get back on patrol, but he hesitated, wanting to spend a little more time with Pukao. Matome's face grew stern, and Tematsu finally agreed to go. Before leaving, he said goodbye to Pukao, wishing he could bring her along. As they walked past the shops in Akihabara, Tematsu noticed Pukao's face displayed on a monitor inside a PC store. Matome urged him to keep moving. After finishing their patrol, they returned to their base, and Tematsu quickly called out to Pukao again. He was stunned when he saw that Pukao could now move on her own. Matome had helped upgrade her. Pukao could walk and even follow Tematsu outside. He was thrilled. Tatsujin explained that Pukao could do more than just walk. She had extendable arms for performing simple tasks and could record Thematsu's daily activities for convenience. Plus, she had a powerful battery that allowed her to operate for long periods of time. Thematsu was overjoyed and gave Pukao a big, friendly hug. Orisa commented that he was being overly enthusiastic, but Pukao responded with a gentle hug in return. Madame, however, didn't seem too pleased with the whole scene. The next day, Madame planned to invite Thematsu to go on patrol with her, but when she arrived at their base, Thematsu was nowhere to be found. Orisa told her that Thematsu had already left to patrol with Pukao. Madame was surprised to hear that. Meanwhile, Thematsu was taking Pukao to Mansubashi Bridge, then to a vehicle museum, and later to an anime store. He said that the store was a very special place to him since many of his youthful dreams were connected to it. Thematsu invited Pukao to come inside, but he was shocked to see that the shop displayed a lot of adult comics. Realizing that Pukao was too young to be in such a place, he quickly let her out instead. After that, Thematsu took Pukao for a walk around Akihabara. The two of them drew quite a bit of attention since he was walking around with a computer by his side. When they started to get tired, Thematsu brought Pukao to a cafe. He ordered a drink and asked to borrow a power outlet so he could charge Pukao's battery. While he was enjoying his drink, people in the cafe couldn't help but stare at Pukao. Feeling all the glances coming her way, Pukao became a bit shy. Thematsu thought it was only natural since Pukao was such a cute computer. Pukao even blushed a little, almost like a person would when being complimented. Across the street, Orisa and Matome were at another cafe. From the window, Matome looked rather irritated as she watched Thematsu with Pukao. Orisa asked why they didn't just patrol together with Thematsu, but Matome said it would be more efficient if they split up. Soon after, she urged Orisa to continue their patrol. That night, before Pukao powered down, she realized just how much Akihabara meant to Thematsu.